Hi, I'm Tom with Just One Pack, and this is AC on the Short Alpha Clash podcast. Well, I talk all things Alpha Clash on my way to work. Now, um, loads of stuff to talk about, but we have to talk about Clashgrounds Makati. So here we go. So if you didn't know, uh, the Philippines just had their Clashground tournament, sort of a national, in lack of better terms. If you somehow should have found this and don't know the organized play structure of Alpha Clash. So Clash Grounds I've actually called it a real competitive format, but it is sort of the nationals for Alpha Clash. So quite a big event in terms of competitive level. What's more interesting is that it was quite a big event in terms of participants as well. A total of 71, I think it was, uh, joined the Clash Grounds Makati um, and battle it out. So hats off to the winner who needs to best a lot of decks to get where he got. Um, Sort of a rundown because there are a few points I think there's really interesting things I haven't seen before and things that was very much as I expected them to. For starters, just a quick rundown. Uh, One of the signs of a good meta is, or healthy meta, is a diverse setup of contenders, and we certainly had that. There was 17 different contenders participating. Of course, there were some um, that only had one or two decks, but other had significantly more. Um, so that is I see as a positive thing. What I what I did what did strike me, because when you have that diversity of contenders, it might be interesting to see which contenders that weren't there sort of say that they are not competitively viable. Notably, the Alpha Hunters was really thin on the ground, um, having no weapons and no moxies. There was, I think four pull decks, so not entirely missing. I'm actually saying that out loud now. I'm not quite sure if he's Alpha Hunter or Rogue. Anyway, Paul was there, but no Moxie, any version of her, or and no weapon, which is interesting. Oh, and no Major Dean either, as far as I remember. So that's kind of interesting, taking the Pro Tour into account. How much of that was the event card? I don't know, but very interesting to see that they were completely missing. What also was interesting is it was almost a flashback in the setup to the early days of Alpha Clash, where we had, I think it was a top 8 just of talk in Manila. And they sort of found the talk recipe back then, and it's still a really strong deck, a really strong contender, because the decks I've seen are not the same. Um, However, no less than 14 players brought a talk deck to the tournament, so that's a lot. Out of the 71, 14 of them were talk. Interesting enough, I'm just going to mention that 5 of them were Alpha Asta. The reason for that will be very clear in a bit, why that is an interesting number as well. So in terms of the top 8, because that's the second idea, the second measurement, yardstick, if you will, for the meta being healthy and the competition being healthy. There was, out of the top 8 were, I think, 5 different contenders. I'm going to go through them because I didn't count them. I only wrote them down. There was talk. Actually, there were 3 different talk builds, but there were talk. There was Alpha Asta. There was Krong. Little Krong was there. Haven, Magnate, the Indomitable, and Genesis. And I sometimes joke that in the US meta you build two colors, and in the Philippine meta you build three colors. It's not entirely true, but it's a little bit funny that it is the case. And loads of these were two colors, and some of them were three colors. So it sort of still sticks. I'm going to mention a few decks that I found interesting. Um, let's, so, yeah, I'm just going to mention those three. Um, the the interesting bits about them. One of the contenders was Haven, as I mentioned, and um, Haven, I thought, were reliant on her backpack in order to win. Now, the Haven that was part of this competition, or at least the one that ended up in top 8, did not have a backpack, which is really interesting. So the strategy around that must have been a very different one. I haven't had time to go dig into the details of how that one worked. Hopefully, Guy, who ran this deck, will post a deck tech video with it on his YouTube channel, and telling us what in the world he was thinking running Haven without a backpack. So if he's listening, please tell us what you were up to. But apparently it worked. So he made it to top 8 with Haven biding time. Another interesting bit was that or I think it was that the Lord Krong deck was a black-green deck. That's not in of itself interesting, but if I should be technically correct, that was a 3-color deck, because there was, I think, 2 or 3 copies of a blue card, Sacrificial Strength. Now, it's a 0-cost quick action, I think, so it's sort of cheating a color in, but it was there, right? So Sacrificial Strength was in there. I might consider doing that in my Krong deck, just because that could be a clever combat trick, and if Lord Krong wants to do anything, then that is clever combat tricks. A bit of annoyance and ambush. I don't think the Krong deck was that heavy into ambush, which is really interesting, to me at least. But he made it to top 8. In fact, he made it to top 4. Haven did not. But Lord Krong did make it to top 4. So something was working there, right? The last one I want to mention is the Alpha Asta. The Alpha Asta deck was 4 colors, as far as I remember. So all but white. And it's a bit of a misnomer, but let's go with it, because there weren't that many black cards in it. But what I found interesting is, sorry, what I found interesting about that deck was that the Alpha Asta give off all the legendary card from the very first set of from the Awakening set, right? He was in there. I've had the debate with quite a few by now that he, at first glance, looks really, really strong, and when you actually get down to using him, he's there. He's not easy to play, right? Because he sort of wipes the board on both sides, and he gives something back to both sides. And he has observance. So even though he's big and strong and dangerous looking, he sort of has to wait a turn, right? So your opponent has a chance to rebuild his side or her side of the board. So maybe not that useful, but this is the first time I've seen him in a competitively viable deck. He may have been there before and I've missed it, but this is the first time I have seen that. And it was competitively viable because it made it all the way to the final uh, before it got beaten by, well, it is the Philippines, so it got beaten by a talk. Um, and I guess uh, very well played talk deck. Um, Going through, it was a very, to my eyes, in my first assessment, was a very traditional but not enraged focused talk deck, but a very traditional build. It had the sort of the talk stables, the small flare, the big flare, the 6/6 flyer, uh, the Here Comes the Broom, and even Crimson Scales. So you sort of have this progression, getting rid of stuff on your side. How much of that was, how much of the rest of the deck that played into that win, I don't know. I suppose it did, but it's interesting to see that that is sort of a core set of playing talk that we just sort of have to do. Uh, but talk did win. Melvin isn't played it. Um, Congratulations to him for that. And very well played, beating 70 other people to the win, including some really good players. Not that Melvin isn't a good player. I can't remember exactly, but this Europe his ninth, eighth, ninth, 10th, something like that, top eight, and he's won before, fifth time I think it was, um, in the article. So very well played, very good to see that Alpha Clash can, in fact, get a lot of people together, playing the game, enjoying the game, and the beta is still so fresh and open that contenders of all sorts can still participate. Anyway, that's all for me, and I hope you get to play some good games as well, and I'll talk to you again later. Bye.